Welcome to the Growth Plus Exit podcast, where owners of privately held middle market companies talk about founding, scaling, and exiting their businesses successfully. Learn how to maximize and monetize your business on your own terms. Let's get started.
Hello, I'm your host, Heather Bennett, for the Growth and Plus Exit podcast, featuring business owners talking about founding, scaling, and potentially exiting their businesses successfully. Past guests on the Growth Plus Exit podcast include Kelly Schrod, founder of Data Vision, Jody Jankowski, CEO of Blackline, and Jeff Janasek, founder of InnoFlight. This episode is brought to you by Newport LLC, a team of seasoned C-suite executives who help CEOs of privately held companies grow, de-risk, and exit their businesses successfully. To learn more about Newport, visit us at newportllc.com or find us on LinkedIn. Before introducing today's guest, I would like to thank Peter Pintar for introducing me to my guest. Thank you, Peter. You can learn more about Peter by visiting the Newport website. Today's guest is Craig Snyder. Craig got his start in the tower industry in 1984 when he took a job as a tower climber to help pay for college. In 1989, he left college to form Sioux Falls Tower and Communications, a tower construction company specializing in the construction and maintenance of cell phone and other towers. He continues to serve as the chairman of VIKOR, which is formerly Sioux Falls Tower today. Craig's over 35-year impact on the industry while serving as VIKOR's founder and CEO has left a lasting impression on the company, its employees, and the industry as a whole. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Heather. Great to be with you today.
So let's get right into it. How did you start this company? I mean, you're climbing poles and you're thinking, you know what, there's got to be a way to do this better. How did that all start?
Well, it really goes back further than just when I started the company, because when I was 12 years old, I had this vision for myself that I wanted to own my own company. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know what the word entrepreneur meant. I'm not even sure if I heard it back then, but in retrospect, that's what I think I really had in my heart. And so as I went through life, I was always looking at what about this business, that business, and I got in my early 20s, I thought, I know what it is. I'm going to start a video rentals company, a store in Sioux Falls. Thankfully, that didn't happen because we know those didn't last that long. But I took a job during my college years climbing towers. What are towers? Well, if you've seen those things off in the distance that are often orange and white, red and white with red blinking lights, those are the towers that I started on, mostly TV and radio, because we didn't have cellular back when I first started climbing towers in the early 80s. And so I was working as a tower climber. Why? It was better pay. It was high risk job. So with the risk comes the better pay. And that just one day, 4 to 5 years after I started climbing towers, the guy I worked for was actually killed crashed his van and was killed. It's sad, but happened on 8/8/88. Day I'll never forget. And after that event, I thought maybe this is it. I didn't plan for that to be my business that I wanted to get into, but gave it to the Lord a little bit, asked him in prayer, what do you think? And I didn't get steered away from it. So I started at that time, Sioux Falls Tower with two partners.
Wow, that's a big leap for somebody of that age to make, to understand that the work still needed to get done, even after tragedy, and somebody needed to do it, and why not you? So tell me about your two partners. How did you decide who to start the work with?
Yeah, it's a great question. My partners weren't like major contributors in the same entrepreneurial way that I was in the early days and all throughout, actually. But they brought me confidence. They were good counselors. They brought me the sense that, I can do this. I don't have to do it alone. A lot of times when you think about business partners, we hear some of the horror stories that if things aren't perfect, partners can be a bad thing. And that was not the case with me. I think good partnerships are unselfish, and I always treated them equally as respectful as I would anyone else. And they really supported me in those early days and later. One of them was older than me, 20 years older, and he retired about 10 years in. And my other partner retired about 5 years ago. And so I had to buy him out, which is always an interesting situation. Even though you love your partners, when it comes time to buy out partners, there's usually a bit of a difference between what you think it's worth and what they think it's worth. But even that turned out to be a good thing. But so my partners, they were working with me in the business or working with me at the previous company that we worked for. And they were natural choices to bring on board as business partners at that time.
So tell me about like those first, we'll say 5-ish years. How did you grow? How did you scale? What were the indicators that said this is successful? We need to keep going.
It's interesting. I'd been in college, so I knew about this thing called a business plan, and I created this plan. I created pro forma financials, and our CFO was going through some old files earlier this summer, and he brought me in a file marked 1989, and it was all the jobs that I did in '89, and it included the pro forma for my business plan. So the best laid plans are usually it doesn't work out that way. The first year, I underperformed the business plan by half, the pro forma. But what do you do? I didn't know anything but just hard work and keep your nose down and keep after it. And so the first year, when we first started the business, we had one big customer. It was a broadcast behemoth in this part of the world, Kelloland, and they owned TV, radio, and cable. And so I went to them and I said, if I start this business, can we count on your business as a customer? And they told me yes. So I thought that was great. They were about 80% of my business plan. But about a year in, or a little less, they decided at the corporate level that they would bid out their work as opposed to just awarding it to me. And I had to bid against another company. And I remember it was so nerve-wracking waiting to find out if we had won the bid, which was going to be for the next year's work. I finally got a call from their chief engineer. I was sitting in my little home apartment office. My office was also my apartment. I didn't have a house, we rented a shop, but that was it. Anyway, got the call, and his name was John. And John said, Craig, I have bad news. You didn't win the bid. And so this is like a year in, 80% of our business. And the good and the bad news was it really crushed me. But the good news was we weren't ready to give up. And so to a certain extent, it made us stronger. That which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so we had to go out and find a dozen or more customers, which we did. And then a year later, we won that business back and kept it for many years after that. But it was sort of like not something you asked for, but in a way was a benefit and a blessing to force us to go out and not rely on just one big customer for our business.
What a wonderful example of de-risking an early stage business, because there's always a risk when you're starting out, and you're smaller than you're going to grow to, that you put too many eggs in one basket. The idea of having, such a high percentage of your revenue be based on a single customer, that's always a nerve-wracking revelation when I'm talking to business owners. I'm like, really? Maybe we should think about that. Let's talk about what the future looks like. So, like you said, in a way, it was a blessing because it helped you move strategically to a less risky portfolio of companies to work with. So that's an interesting lesson learned. Any other lessons in those early stages or even along the way that you maybe didn't expect or felt helped you move forward and keep the business scaling?
Yeah, another really hard lesson. So we're about 2 years in business, and it's three guys in a truck still. The early days, we have about 50 crews now. So back then we had one. And so we're up in North Dakota. We're doing some tower inspections, and the tower we're working on, unbeknownst to us, had corrosion below ground on one of the guy wire anchor points. It was about 7 feet below ground. That day I wasn't feeling really well, so I didn't climb with my partners. They were up about 150, 180 feet on the tower when the anchor broke. And if you know anything about guide towers, if you have three anchors and one of them is no longer there, the tower falls. The tower fell. They were both on it and they came down and were severely injured, didn't die. But after that, both we had the tragedy of all this severe injury and how to pay for that. Plus, our business pipeline pretty much shut off because word gets around fast that this happened. And so your customers just kind of quit calling you. And it was another one of those moments where, just like the one where we lost our main customer, where we had to just like scrap and scrape and scratch through to try to figure out how to do that. We took different jobs, and I really thought the business was over at that point. But the phone started ringing again, and the guys healed up, and we turned lemons into lemonade in that, and formed a new company that provides corrosion control on guide tower anchors, and it still operates today. It's called Anchor Guard. But that wasn't the plan. It wasn't like, let's have a tragedy so we can create a new company. That just came out of it. But it was another one of those. The first 7 years of business was hard. It was very hard. And the seventh year, it turned. And then there's been ups and downs since, but those first 7 years were really tough. That was another one of those experiences that made it tough.
I can't even imagine. It's impressive that you were able to have the foresight to say this is worth working through, and then to see that there was a need. Well, if this is going to happen to this tower, maybe it might happen to others. And let's be, predictive and do some maintenance to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Very interesting. Um, and this is something I'm seeing a lot, is that there'll be a need within the same industry, and then there's vertical integration happening in terms of building out the business. So then you get to year 7 and things are going swimmingly. We'll say at that point you've crossed a barrier. What does scaling look like? Because you said you're at like 50 trucks now from one. How how did that happen in terms of the capital raise and the people?
Well, one of the things that when I started the business in 1989, I didn't know was going to happen was this thing called cell phones. Cell phones in big markets were getting traction in the late 80s. In our market, they got traction more in the early 90s. And so right after we started, all of a sudden we're getting calls from cell phone companies. I didn't know what cell phone companies, even were, but that helped us begin to scale and diversify away from just radio and TV and into another brand new emerging industry. And as if you know what, cellular, everyone's got a phone in their pocket or purse right now. So there's many, many towers that got built. That helped us scale. The one thing that's maybe unique or different from me, from many other businesses that scaled, is I never took any outside capital or never invited in any outside equity. I always did it through profit and bank debt. So we scaled more gradually and slowly than some might, and I was happy with that. I felt better with that. I've always had a bit of an aversion to being beholden to partners or outside equity people that would make me feel like I wasn't performing, or I needed to show my numbers, and if the numbers weren't there, that pressure was worse or felt like it would be worse. I never tried it, but it felt like it would be worse for me than the other pressures that come with business, which is, making payroll, paying the bills, meeting your debt obligations, and keeping customers happy. Those were all pressures I could handle pretty well. I didn't want to add the next pressure on where I had people looking over my shoulders thinking I was maybe not doing it right. So we scaled slowly and gradually, but opportunities continued to present themselves. And I was wise with my money, and we kept our debt down. And so I just poured the profit right back into the next truck and the next truck and the next truck. Probably the biggest hurdle for me, first I had to go from, we call foreman crew chiefs. I was the crew chief. So we were one crew. I had to go from one crew to two crews, then three. Then I had to go into the office and become a project manager. And then we took it from three crews to 4 and 5 crews. And then one project manager it was too much for one. Adding that second project manager was probably the scariest thing that I did in those first 7 years in business, because I just thought we can't afford that overhead. We run a really tight ship. But I finally got brave, added that project manager, and then we began to really scale. And then once I saw that you could add project managers and other back office support, then we could scale a lot more rapidly. And we started to really grow after that. And I remember, I said year 7 was the big year. At the end of year 7, we had just, the Telecommunications Act of 1996 really ramped up cellular. So we could kind of name our price as tower contracting companies. And so I ended up with like a few $100,000 in the bank. All the bills were paid, and it was the end of the year. I'd paid my taxes. I still had a couple $100,000. I remember calling my accountant and saying, what can I do with this? And she was a lady. She said, well, it's yours. You can take it. I said, yeah, I know I can. I kind of knew I could take it, but how do I do that? And she said, well, there's this thing, they're called distributions. Never heard that word before. And so I said, so if I take a distribution, do I have to send some of it to Uncle Sam? And she said, no, you've already paid your taxes. It's yours. So I said, I can just write myself a check. She said, you can just write yourself a check. And when I found that out, I had another windfall that happened in a separate deal. I bought a new house, and my wife and I, my family, went from this little 1.5-story house in the middle of town to a nice, big, comfortable house on the edge of town, and that was just like huge for me. Instead of taking one step up in house, I took like 2.5 steps up, and it was such a celebration. And a really big deal and a very happy thing for me and for my partners, who also benefit.
That's such a wonderful example of like working so hard for so long and then realizing, okay, this is going to pay off, and such a nice lifestyle improvement. We were talking earlier that you have multiple children, and I also do. It's good to have those lifestyle improvements so you can focus on the family and then also focus on your work without being distracted. Well, that's wonderful. So with the scaling, you're building more trucks, you're having more trucks added to your fleet, you're adding more project managers, and what were some of the technological advances? I know we all talk about tech transformation during the scaling process. What did that look like in terms of, it's not just the people you're hiring, but what other methodologies or tools or technology did you use to help you scale that process?
Well, VIKOR's always been a leading edge technology driven company. We work in technology, so I surrounded my people that were interested in technology. Like my company, we were I think the first tower contracting company that got a website in 1996. Websites were like optional back then. And so we would start to bring on systems and processes as they came available. Like when drones first hit the street, we were the first ones to use drones to inspect towers and, to send up, cameras so that we didn't have to climb if there was potential problems. We always were on the cutting edge of accounting software. Eventually, we brought in back office software that complemented our accounting software, so that all things could be done on your phone or your tablet. So in the field, as soon as we could make our crews make it possible for our crews to use their phones to interact with the office, with the customer, report time sheets, all their expenses, things like that, we did. And we've always done that. In addition, we were always on the cutting edge of safety. We invested a lot in safety, in our safety training, in our facilities, in our people. I was one of the first companies. We're a very small industry. There's probably about 2,500 companies across the country that do what we do. And probably 2,000 of those are under 50 employees. So there's just a handful of us that are bigger. But we always invested in safety. And like my building that I'm in today, when we started scaling, we started adding offices around the country. But in my building today that I'm in, we have a state-of-the-art training center. Because in our industry, we can't go to trade schools and find tower technicians, for example. Nobody trains them. The closest you can get is maybe to linemen that do electrical poles, or wind energy programs will train some people that at least they know how to climb, because we do all the things we do. Most of the things we do are at height. But we have to be our own trade tech. So we bring our people in, we train them, send them back out into the field. And so you have to have facilities to do that. So part of the scaling was just always staying on the cutting edge of the technology that our industry needed, and to train people and to make sure your customers are comfortable that they're handing over to you $1 million systems, multi-million-dollar systems, and they want to know it's done right. And so we stayed on that, and even being a part of forming a new tower association that didn't exist before that time. So those are some of the examples of finding ways to grow and using technology to do it.
Absolutely. And I love the concept of keeping people around you who are very technology savvy, and making sure to rely on them so that you're not missing opportunities to, like you said, include drones and other aspects of technology that can make the work more efficient, more customer friendly, and then, most importantly, safe, which is very encouraging. So you mentioned the association. Tell me a little bit about how that came about, and who else in the industry helped you create the association?
Yeah, it's interesting. I always say that if you have a good idea, there's probably 100 other people or 99 other people that are having the exact same idea. And the entrepreneurs are the ones that can take that idea and actually do something with it. It's one thing to think about it. It's another thing to actually invest time, energy, and those kinds of things. So I had this idea. I'm still new in business. This is 1996. So I'm like 7 years in, or 95 actually. And I'm thinking, we need to have a Tower Erectors Association. I mean, we're a bunch of wild-eyed cowboys doing it on our own. We're kind of competitive. And anyway, but I had a friend up the road here in South Dakota who's having the same idea. And we had met a few times, and he called me one day and said, his name was Bill Carlson, and this is his voice. Craig, I'm thinking about starting an association. You want to join me? And I'm like, Bill, I'm having the same idea. Let's do it. So he said, I have another friend. His name is Kevin Hayden. I'll call him, and let's get together and form this association. And so That was 1995. And we just, technology was very basic back then. In order to find out who all the tower companies were, you literally had to go to the yellow pages. There was no internet and nobody had websites. So, but you could hire a service that would search the national yellow pages and send you on green and white, perforated edge dot matrix printer, all the list of all those tower companies. And so Bill and I and Kevin, we started just calling and sending letters to anybody that was on the list as in yellow pages under towers. And we invited them to a meeting. We set a date in February of 1995 in Dallas, Texas, and about 60 companies showed up. And we had an administrator identified, and we formed this association. And it's grown, and many companies have joined that association, and it's been a great benefit to us ever since. So it was just an idea, but then execution was a big thing. And Kevin and Bill and I ended up forming companies together after that, and it was a symbiotic relationship, and it's been throughout my career, and benefited many people. My personal vision statement is to elevate the industry for the betterment of everyone. And forming we called it NATE, National Association of Tower Erectors, is just an early indicator of something that has really motivated me throughout my career and continues to motivate me in different ways today as the chairman and less day-to-day leader of VIKOR.
Yeah, and what a great way for both you and VIKOR to help the industry as a whole. It's so important to be a connected part of a community and to advance, especially because of the amount of technology that's been injected into what you do. It's really necessary to work together, I think, to move things forward. It's very exciting. Very cool. Another major step for VIKOR was adding a board of directors. Could you tell me a little bit about that process? Because I'm guessing when there was one truck and three guys, you didn't need a board of directors. So what happened that helped you see the benefit of having that advisory and that insight?
So about 30 years in, which is about 5 years ago, it started to become, I'd always been building this company to sell. I think most people that do start a company like mine have their eye on the exit at some point. And Kevin, one of my friends that I just mentioned that started the association, he used to say, "Craig, what's your number?" And going back 25 years, my number was here. And then he'd ask me that a few years later, and it was there, and then it was there, and there. It never was quite enough, Well, if I can get it to here, why not get it to there? Anyway, so about 30 years in, my kids are now in their mid 20s to 30, and they're starting to take interest in the company. And so all of a sudden, my focus went from selling to holding and maybe making it a multi-generational family business, which meant I don't get the payday, and I haven't gotten the payday, but God's been good to me. I don't have to complain too much. But so anyway, I thought, well, let's do this. And at the very same time, like I got an email from this organization called Prairie Family Business Association, and they're basically a multi-generational business support organization that are under the umbrella of the University of South Dakota. And so I'm like, And I looked into it. I joined the association, and they started teaching me about things like board of directors, family governance documents, family advisors, and things like that. And so that was about 5 years ago. And I realized, well, if we're going to make this a multi-generational business, we better get it set up the way it's meant to be fair to the next generation and to do things by the book. And the board of directors was a big part of that because you need outside advisors, especially getting my age. I was going to eventually exit as CEO. If you're going to exit as CEO, well, who's keeping an eye on the business? Well, I'm a board member. I'm the chairman of the board right now, but having those close advisors, outside advisors. That was part of the thing. It's not just, and they taught me through this, you don't hire your accountant, your attorney, and your friend at church to be your board members. You go get legitimate board members like Peter Pintar with your company. Like, you got to get real people that understand, that have done it at a higher level than you. And that's what we did when we started forming the board, Kristen and I, my wife.
Absolutely. And that's such an important step in the growth of a company, is preparing the wise advisory of a board to help you decide on what the next step is. It may be exit. Sometimes it's exit. Sometimes it's preparing it for, multi-generation leadership. Uh, it's such an advantage to have that level of thinking. And you got very good advice, because you're going to talk to your lawyer and your accountant anyways. So it's important to see how many more people you can bring into the decision-making process. It's people to help you. I do board of directors work, and it's always about asking the right questions and having people who understand enough to ask the right questions to get you to think about what that next decision is going to be.
Yeah.
So what an excellent example of when to pull that in. Very cool. Very
Well,
cool.
at the time we were about a $50 million company, and we had designs on being a $100 million company.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, let's get board members that have run 100 million plus companies. And that's what we found. And they've been excellent, because they see around corners that you just can't see around until you get there. And even when you get there, you're not, well, I turn left or I turn right. And having those wise advisors, I would highly recommend it for anybody. I mean, even if you're not my age, but you're trying to grow your company, getting some of those wise outside advisors is really good.
Yeah, the other time we tend to recommend it is when companies, I know you self-funded during the scaling process, but when companies have reached a point where they need to capital raise, having an advisory board, having a board of directors helps that process immensely, because like you said, they see around the corners, they know the questions that those capital partners will be asking or what they're looking for. So it's incredibly valuable part of the process. So, so what's your vision for the company? You've talked a little bit about it, but what's your vision for VIKOR going forward?
Well, continue growth. My kids are pretty ambitious, and so I think they would love to get their DNA into the company more and more, and mine out a little more and more. And most companies that are multi-generational companies that really succeed, they don't do it in the first generation. The first gen is kind of the bootstrapping generation, and they get it to a certain level, but it's the second gen and even the third that take it to, I think about like Chick-fil-A. I think it started in the 50s, but the first gen wasn't going to take it to 1,500 franchises or whatever it is today. And I think that's what we're looking for here at VIKOR. Not just VIKOR, but what else can we do as a family? So we got a really excellent management team here at VIKOR. And they're not, the top leadership is not family right now. It's others. I mean, family is in there, but our CEO is non-family. Excellent. He's put together an excellent team that have their eye on the prize. And so is my job to make sure they're rewarded well for that growth, and just to kind of steer the ship with the rest of the board, guiding them along that path. But yeah, that's what's next. Okay, let's go to 100 million. If we can get to 100 million, what about 200? And do we really want to take it to a billion? Who knows? A dollar company. I think that with Craig's vision, I'm pretty good with slow, steady growth, slow to medium, steady growth. But I think my kids are going to probably want to who knows? We might have equity partners down the road. I don't know. We'll see.
Good to be open-minded, especially with, like you said, there's a lot of things that have happened in the industry that were unexpected. Um, so speaking of advisors, who are some of the mentors that you've had along the way, and what's the best advice you've ever gotten from them?
Well, I'm going to first give a shout out to my wife. Kristen never worked in the business, but because she was such an excellent partner in my life and at home and taking care of our kids, my family is equally as important, or it's really more important than my business. And she took care of that so excellently. She was my best advisor, by far. um, Kevin and Bill, my partners in starting the association and in other business endeavors, were probably some of my other really good advisors. They were older than me. Bill was 20 years older. Kevin was 10 years older. And so they didn't always give me specific advice, but we would get together a lot of times in the past, like weekly, and they would say, "Yeah, I'm having a trouble with my civil crews, or we got to get a civil crew here." And I'm like, "A civil crew? What's a civil crew? I don't even know what a civil crew is. I got to figure out what a civil crew is. If they've got civil crews, I got to have civil crews." Well, civil crews are just the crews that build the foundations under the tower. Well, we always just focused on the aerial stuff, but to be a robust, well-rounded company, you have to have civil. So they would always just push me to see something a little bit further ahead, a little more. And they've been great advisors to me. I've watched people like, more recently, Elon Musk. I'm a fan of Elon Musk, and just seeing like what's it like to be a CEO? Well, it's like staring into the abyss and eating glass. I'm like, yeah, I've had days like that. But seeing people that really have outperformed, that impresses me. I like to watch people that can outperform it. I don't have to be necessarily their friend or directly connected. And I've had some great spiritual advisors in my church life along the way as well that have guided me. And I'm a man of God, and so I'm going to just say one other very important thing for me, because it's really true for me. If I didn't know what to do, and there was a big decision sitting right in front of me, and I had to take a left or a right on the why, I talked to God. And he didn't like visit me like Moses on Mount Sinai, but he would guide me away from something that was not good and towards something that was good. And throughout my life, I would argue, I often say, if you can do that and you can get in tune to that, it raises your IQ about 10 plus points. And I really think that's true. And so he's probably been my best quiet advisor over all of them.
Excellent. And I love that you mentioned so many, because it does take more than one voice to help you move forward. Um, Excellent examples. Really good. Really, really good. What daily rituals do you find help you get through a typical day?
Well, to me, I start my day with devotional, a little bit of prayer, a little bit of study in the good book, and then some exercise. You hear my kids went to a YMCA youth camp when they were kids, and they would sing this song about body, mind, and spirit. And it's really true. You got to take care of your body. You got to take care of your mind. So I read books. I listen to podcasts like yours. I am always trying to expand my mind and spirit. Take care of your spirit. Stay connected to God. If you'll do something in each of those categories every day, it is the fuel that you need, so that when stuff comes up, you kind of can know what to do and how to press forward. And sometimes hard things come up that even then, it doesn't seem like it's enough, but that's my formula, basic formula for powering through every day. By the way, I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I started a health food store in Sioux Falls, first of its kind, one of its kind, called Pomegranate Market. And we're building our second store right now. And so I do believe I'm not a health food nut. I'm not a foodie. I'm not like a granola loving, tree hugger, anything like that. But I do believe that healthy eating, goes into that body part. And so even people like RFK Jr. right now that are trying to teach us all something a little bit better, I think is a good thing. And it motivates me.
Interesting. Yes. Yeah. It's taking care of everything so that you can do the best work you can do. So before we wrap up, one last question, and I've been talking to Craig Snyder of the founder of VIKOR. So look for VIKOR and to learn more about Craig and find him on LinkedIn. But the last question I have is, what is one hard lesson that you wish every entrepreneur knew? That you learned along the way that you'd love to share with future business owners and entrepreneurs?
Well, on the wall right above me here, there's a plaque, and it has a poem on it. And it's a poem that by an anonymous author. Nobody knows who wrote it, but very profound. It starts like this: stick to your task until it sticks to you. Beginners are many, but enders are few. And the last phrase says, for out of the bend and the sweat and the smile will come life's victories after a while. I believe in patience. Don't react too quickly to whatever the good is or whatever the bad is. Be in the middle, be steady. Don't worry when the hard times come, they will pass. And sometimes it takes longer than you'd hope. 12 months, 18 months. Business cycles can go 12 months, 18 months, 24 months when you're down in the trough. Don't give up. Don't give in. Stick to your task until it sticks to you. That has been my theme throughout my career. It continues to be my theme today, and it's served me extremely well in business and in many ways.
This has been great. Thank you so much, Craig. I really appreciate you sharing your story and everything you've learned. I'm so glad that Peter introduced us. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you for listening to the Growth Plus Exit podcast, sponsored by Newport, a unique national business advisory firm. If you enjoyed this show, be sure to share, like, and subscribe for future episodes.